What is up, you guys? Welcome back to Me TV Reviews. I am your host, Mo, and tonight, y'all, we're going to be doing a little something new. All right, and the only reason I say a little is because I watched the first two episodes, but we're still trying to get the character development and all of that down. So this is the show Rainmaker, excuse me, The Rainmaker, that is being shown on USA and also on Peacock if you're watching it on strictly streaming services. All right. So this show just recently started airing. I want to say maybe 2 Fridays ago. And I just caught the first two episodes like the other day. All right. Was halfway paying attention, but it did kind of intrigue me. So we'll see what happens. Now, from what I saw, I believe this is based off a movie, which is actually based off a book. And it's like a series of books actually by John Grisham. And he was a lawyer at one point in time. Okay. And so let's go ahead and get into it real quick. This one airs, like I said, on USA and on Peacock. And I believe they show new episodes on Peacock every Friday. All right. So we'll just give you a character overview real quick and a brief, very brief summary of what happened between the two episodes. Now, if I mix and mash some things together, y'all please charge into my head and not my heart, all right? So our main character, his name is Rudy, and he's got a girlfriend named Sarah, and they are both law students that are finna get ready to take the LSAT within the next couple of weeks. So they're studying, and so while they're waiting to get official jobs, Rudy actually is a bartender. Sarah comes from a family with means. They have money. She's very privileged, and so she doesn't necessarily have to worry about finances like that. Rudy and his mama, they had a good relationship, or so it seemed, until it seems like she remarried, and him and the stepdaddy or the boyfriend, I believe he's just a boyfriend, are they definitely do not see eye to eye. So that has put a strain on his and his mom's relationship. Now he does currently stay with her, and something happens to the effect of him finding out that the boyfriend is taking advantage of his mom. And so while that's happening, the stepdad and the mom also find out a truth about him. Either he had, I don't think he had lost his job, but he ended up getting fired from, we'll get there. So, anywho, Sarah and Rudy are together, and they want to go to this prestigious law firm that is being headed by this guy named Leo Drummond. Now, Leo Drummond is like the best of the best, right? Very revered within the law community. Everybody wants to work there. He's like the cream of the crop. Okay, so if you work for him, you good to go as long as you don't get on his bad side. Well, just so happens Rudy Rudy has a thing for rebelling against not necessarily authority, but against bullies, okay? And Leo is definitely one of those. So something happens, like I said, something happens between him and the mom's boyfriend, to the effect of him getting popped in the mouth by the boyfriend and the boyfriend taking off. Now, before he gets ready to leave, the mama ends up telling Rudy, hey, you gotta go. Okay? You lied to me about whatever you lied to me about. Y'all, I can't remember. I am so sorry. But you lied to me about it, and it's caused some strain. Yes, he is wrong, but so are you, and you have to go. And so he was like, all right, mom, whatever. So when the boyfriend had popped him in the mouth, it caused his lip to burst, okay, or his lip to bust. And so blood had got over his all on his clothes, And so she was like, hey, you need to go change your suit because this is the first day of him starting at this law firm. And he was like, no, this is the only suit I got. So they don't come from a family with means. Okay. They seem like they live in paycheck to paycheck around there. Just so he can try to pursue his dreams of getting into this prestigious law firm. Right. So he gets there, but by the time he gets there, he's late. So everybody else is there. Sarah is looking around for him because she's supposed to be working there as well. Now, mind you, they still haven't taken their LSAT at this point, but they've been given special permission to start working on certain cases while they wait to take the LSAT. So they're able to do a couple of things until they get their license to practice. So he gets there and he gets there late. Now, as he's sliding through the door, Leo is talking, but Leo notices him slip in. And so he's trying to have somebody argue a particular case or argue against a particular case. And so he picks on Rudy because he just came in late. And so Rudy starts giving him different points that he can argue, and Leo is antagonizing him. Okay. And so not Leo, Rudy ends up like giving a really good argument, but because he stands up to Leo, Leo ends up firing Rudy on his first day. Yeah, he ain't even make it through the door good and he already out. So this definitely is going to cause a rift between him and Sarah because Sarah's like, what the hell? So he's trying to find him um, a different he's trying to find him a different firm to work at, and his boss at the bar ends up recommending him to to this law firm where his friend Bruiser works. Now, her dad preceded her in the practice of this law firm, if I'm not mistaken, and also from what I believe I heard, Bruiser's dad and Leo have quite the past, but we haven't been able to dive into that just yet. Just know that they have some history there that might not be so great on when it comes to Leo. It seems like Leo owes Bruiser's dad a couple of favors. All right. And so he walk in and he's trying to get ready to present himself and he's looking for a guy. Y'all, it's a girl. Bruiser is a girl. Okay. She's a woman. Excuse me. So, um, Bruiser hits the law firm there, and her assistant is Dick. Now, Dick, yes, like the back deck, like a patio deck, he has attempted to try to take the LSAT quite a few times. I believe they said 7 times, and 7 times has not been the charm for him because he has yet to pass it still. So he's decided to cut his losses and just help Bruiser where he can, right? And that's like go find clients and stuff for her. So him and Bruiser have a conversation, and she basically knows that the only reason he is there is because he has tried every other law firm. He has, interviewed with several around town, and nobody will give him a chance aside from her. So that's why he's there. He knows that and she does too. And so he ends up telling her that he needs an advance on whatever she's going to pay him because he now has to find a place to stay. And so they end up negotiating it down to 5,000. All right. So it's enough to get him in the door at a particular apartment. It's not the best, but it's a place, right? Place for him to lay his head and hopefully make his house a home sometime soon. Now, whether Sarah is going to be there or not, that's going to be up for debate because she is starting to move kind of slimy. So, he ends up finding this place and he invites Sarah over. Now, before we get to that part of it, the first day that he works out an agreement with Bruiser, him and Dick end up going to the hospital because at the beginning of the first episode, we see this guy. He wakes up, his house is on fire. It is engulfed in flames. And so when he wakes up, he starts coughing. He grabs his oxygen, his portable oxygen, because he need that, right? So he wakes up, he realizes that the house is on fire, and the first thing he tries to do after he puts on his oxygen is try to see if his mom is okay. So he's trying to go in there and wake her up, but he can't get to her because the fire has like consumed her doorway. So he's calling for her to wake up, and like the camera pans to where we can see the front of her, and her eyes are wide open. She's dead, y'all. Okay, she gone. So something, it seems like, must have happened to her prior to, because usually if you die like in a house fire, I don't think that your eyes will be open. Like you would die of smoke inhalation, right? So you would probably just like go to sleep and never wake up, I assume. Just making an assumption. So he manages to get out and she doesn't. So they end up going to this hospital. And when they get there, I'm sorry, before they get there, they actually go talk to Sarah and Sarah and Milo. That's his real name, y'all. Sarah and Rudy. Forgive me. Before he gets fired, Sarah and Rudy actually go talk to this lady named Dot. Now, Dot's son was an addict. And I can't remember his name, y'all. I feel like his name is Ed, or that is not his name. Her son, he passed away when he was admitted to the hospital. She is claiming that it is the malpractice of the hospital. That's the reason why her son is dead, because of the malpractice from the hospital. They neglected to properly care for her son while he was under their supervision, and as a result of that, his death is on their hands. So now the hospital is claiming that, when he arrived there, he had relapsed because he is a recovering addict. But according to Dot, he had been sober for 1 year. He had got his sobriety chip, his 1 year sobriety chip, and he had placed all that attention and that energy that he needed to redirect after he got clean onto like doing arts and crafts. Let me not say arts and crafts. He was a wood sculptor. And so he would make all these various crafts out of wood, which were amazing. He was a wood carver. Anywho, okay, he was practicing in sculpting wood. So she knows for a fact that her son was clean when he died, when he went to the hospital, and the hospital is just not willing to take responsibility for her son's death. They don't want to pay out. And so I think when they first went there, Rudy was still working for Leo. And so she basically came to accept that they wouldn't be able to help her. And so they left, right? They ended up leaving. She didn't want to take whatever deal that they were trying to offer. And so that was that. Or maybe, yeah. So that was that. And so then everything happened with Leo where he got fired. And now him and Deck are actually at the hospital. And so he's chasing, they're basically ambulance chasers. Deck is awful. He's awful at trying to find clients. And so this guy had got into a hit and run accident where it was like a DUI. Sorry. The other driver was driving under the influence, and he ended up getting hit by this drunk driver. Sorry, y'all. And so Deck is trying to convince this guy to come on board and let them represent him, and he's just awful. So Rudy overhears it, and he eventually steps in and convinces the guy to allow them to represent him for his case. And so while they're out there at the hospital, in the hallway, Deck ends up seeing the guy that was involved in the house fire. Now, at this point, he has handcuffs on him because they suspect that he is responsible for the fire that killed his mom. They're saying that he was an arsonist. He is this arsonist that has been setting fires around town and causing deaths here and there, right? So, um, when Deck is finna get ready to leave after they've had this one client sign off, he's trying to go talk to him real quick to see if he could possibly represent him. And here comes this other lawyer. Okay, they can't stand each other. He's the op. And unfortunately for Deck at this point, the guy ends up choosing the op to represent him. Okay, so Rudy was like, man, whatever. All right. So at this point, they end up going to go talk to Dot. Now, Dot is again trying to convince Rudy that her son was sober. So he was like, all right, cool, but we have to see if we can find some more stuff to even try to see if this case is viable at this point. So they end up going over to her son's house and they're looking through everything. Now, mind you, she's still been in talks with the insurance company or with the hospital, and they're still trying to lowball her on this settlement. Now, Rudy's whole thing is if they're trying to throw her money before this even goes into like talks about negotiations and discovery and all of that, then there's clearly something there. So we need to keep trying to see if what she's saying about her son being clean is true. So they end up going over to the house. And according to like the paramedics report, they had found him in the bathroom. It seems like he had just finished using the bathroom. Now, they had also exhumed his body because they wanted to run like a separate toxicology report because according to what they had found, it just wasn't enough. They said that it was an OD. So they ended up running like a separate panel of their own. And the way that the panel was, the results came back, he had a mixture, he had a cocktail of different drugs in his system. So it was like morphine, heroin, along with some other drugs, right? And all of those may not necessarily be in his system, but because morphine and heroin pop up, like they present the same on the panel, it could have very well been morphine and not heroin that was in his system. But because he has a drug history, the defense could argue that it was heroin and not morphine that was given from the hospital that was the cause of his death. So either side could have an argument for that. So they're going to need more solid proof to before they can proceed with this case. So they ended up going to the house and they don't really find too much of anything besides the sobriety chip and the work that he was working on prior to his death. But when they go in the bathroom, they find that there is still some urine in the toilet bowl. And so they end up scooping it out with a ladle and going to go test it, right? To prove whether or not her son was clean before he was admitted to the hospital. So when they run the toxicology report on that, it came back clean, which means that whatever happened to him, however the drugs got into his system, it had to be after he was admitted to the hospital. Now, when they were at his house and Rudy saw like the art stuff that he was working on, he was like, yeah, if he was an addict, his hands wouldn't be able to do this much detailed work because they would constantly be like shaking and stuff. So there are other things to support Dot's claims that he was clean. And also the reason why she's saying that the hospital was negligent was because she was saying that his nurse was impaired, whether it be drugs or alcohol or whatever. Like the nurse was negligent. He had went there because he had the flu. He went there, he got diagnosed with the flu, in some kind of way he ended up dead. Now she's saying that it was because of the negligence, but of course the hospital ain't willing to admit to that. It was on behalf of the nurse, the negligence that is. So, anywho, they tried to go get some more information about the potential arsonist guy because Deck is saying that this is like a miscarriage of justice, right? And so they go sneak in his room when he's out, like his hotel room. He's holed up somewhere. And so they end up sneaking into his hotel room, and there's some people that are following this guy, but they don't know that, right? So when they sneak into his hotel room, the people that are actually following him end up breaking it up. And so the guy actually comes back and he sees that there are people in his room. And so he figures, they're out to hurt him. And so he ends up borrowing like one of the other people's trucks that are there at the motel. And he ends up crashing into his own room. And so the people that are following him are like, okay, what are we supposed to do? So they continue to follow him. And he ends up getting away from the lady because it's like a lady and a guy team. And so the lady is looking for this guy on foot, and the guy is like in his car trying to find him in the alleys. And so he ends up catching up to the guy in the car, and he ends up like jabbing him with maybe like some insulin or something to knock him out for a while. And so by the time he comes to, it's a whole new day. And he's tied up to a tree. And so the guy is trying to ask him, hey, who are you working for? Who sent you? And so the guy's not willing to give up the name. And so he asks him a couple more times again. The guy's not willing to give up the name, so he ends up shooting him in both his kneecaps. Now, I can't remember if it was before or after this scene, but he also ended up possibly killing a lady, an elderly woman, because he was posing like he was like her new tenant for this rental property that she had. And she was like, nah, because I would have remembered your face. And he was like, well, it's unfortunate for you that you pretty good with faces because, and he ended up jabbing her. And I think it was some insulin. I think he killed her, y'all. So anyway, his name is Melvin. The potential arsonist, mama killer. Yeah, we think his name is Melvin. Or we know his name is Melvin. So, he's still on the run while they're trying to prove this case against him. And we don't know who these people are working for. I'm going to assume it's not even an assumption. I'm sorry. Because by the end of episode 2, we find out who they're working for. So, like I said, he's gathering all this information on Dot's behalf so they can get ready to go to court. Well, by the time they get to court, Dot don't want nothing to do with Rudy, even though he had convinced her to sign off for them to represent her on this case. She don't want nothing to do with Rudy because she feels like Rudy doesn't have enough faith in what she's trying to tell them about her son being sober. So by the time they show up to court to argue that they want to continue with this case versus settling out, this is the first time she's ever met Bruiser, right? And she wants Bruiser to represent her. Now, side note, Bruiser is having a sexual relationship with the op. Now, the op is not tied to Leo, okay? This is the guy that's representing Melvin, our potential serial arsonist mama killer, okay? So she's having a sexual relationship with the op. And so she ended up, oh my gosh, he gave her permission to do something. I can't remember what it was, y'all. It'll come to me. Anywho, so Dot wants Bruiser to represent her in court on this particular day. So Leo comes in and he's expecting them to settle out, and they was like, no. Now Bruiser is doing the best that she can with the information that she got, but it's just not enough at this point. So even though Rudy has not passed his LSAT, he stands up and he speaks to the rest of the evidence that they have. That is enough cause for them to move forward with the case. And so the judge is convinced. And so Leo is highly embarrassed by Rudy because he ain't even an official lawyer yet. And you done let this fool embarrass you in court like this? Oh, okay. You don't let this man show you up in court like this? Oh, okay. Not to be outdone. Now, mind you, Sarah is still working for Leo. And not only that, I think she was there for like some event, or maybe she was just there that particular day. And she ended up running into the guy who is over the account for the hospital that Dot is currently trying to sue. So you see how this can get a little tight. Okay, things gonna get real tight around here. So they want her to represent him, or be the I guess the handler for him over the account, because he was impressed with her ability to memorize like book covers. So he was thoroughly impressed with her, and because of that, Leo now wants her to be the handler for that particular account. Okay. But this causes conflict, of course, between her and Rudy. And so now she's coming back to Rudy talking about, hey, you need to drop whatever case you think you have against Leo for this case. And he was like, nah, I'm not doing it, because there's something there. Now, she did try to help Rudy get rehired. And Leo was like, nah, I'm not doing that. Not doing it. And so he was real disrespectful, y'all. When she was asking him about him possibly hiring him back, he was eating like a burger and fries. He just kept tossing fries on the floor. And she just kept picking them up and throwing them away. And so she was like, after a while, like after the third time, she was like, why are you doing this? And he was like, oh, I'm just trying to figure out what type of person you are. Yeah. So there was a little strain between Rudy and Sarah for a quick second, because of how Rudy has showed up Leo in court. But I mean, eventually they end up making up or whatever. But by the end of by the end of the second episode, Leo basically asked Sarah, how far are you willing to go? Because, I mean, are you going to be all in with us at the firm, or are you going to be with your boyfriend? And so the account holder was like, what are you talking about? Like, he wants to go ahead and settle things with Dot for $250,000, right? It went from $50,000 to $250,000 after Leo was embarrassed in court. And so Leo let it be known that Sarah has ties to Rudy. And so they ended up asking her what all she knew about Rudy, because they oftentimes do research on their opponents, their court opponents, for every case. So just in case they need to get their hands dirty, they know who they're going up against. So she basically tells them stuff that they already know, and then they get ready to dismiss her. Now, when she's getting ready to walk out the door, she knows that this is probably like her last day working there. And instead of her going out with her pride, with her integrity as a person, she ends up telling Leo that, Rudy had a brother. And so because of how Rudy's brother died, I think he had gotten sick, and he went to the hospital, and the hospital wasn't willing to cop to it or whatever. Because of that, he doesn't like bullies, which Leo is definitely a bully. He was like, all right, how much else do you know? So we didn't see her tell them anything else at that particular point. And so when she saw Rudy could kind of sense that something was off, but she was like, oh, everything's fine. I'm just studying for the LSAT. I'm just nervous about the LSAT. So, they end up making out. Now, also, at Rudy's new place, he has this neighbor that he can kind of see directly into her home in several different spots in her house. So like the living room and then like in the bathroom or something like that. It's really weird. She does have blinds, but sometimes they're just like up, right? So this lady seems to be about Rudy's age, and she has this abusive boyfriend. Now, we didn't know that at first. And so by the time the second episode rolls around, she was coming home, and apparently he had startled her because he was supposed to be at work. And so when he comes to tell her hello, he's apologizing to her off the rip because he had just beat her ass, right? So he was like, baby, I'm sorry. I'm not going to do it again, da da da. And so she goes into the bathroom because he's trying to like love bomb her at this point and, make out with her and play in the sheets with her. And even though she don't want to, she's kind of forced to because of the situation, the abusive situation that she's in. So she was like, let me just freshen up. And so she goes into the bathroom, and Rudy ends up spotting the bruises that are like on her rib cage. But as he's looking at that, y'all, he looks in the other window and sees the boyfriend staring directly at him. So now the boyfriend is probably going to have some static with Rudy because he probably think, that he's a perv, right? But he's also onto your abusive ways too. But you don't know that he a lawyer. But Rudy gonna do something about that because he don't like that, and I don't either. Okay, call the cops. So they want to settle out with Dot before this gets out of hand, before there's any more steam behind the story. And so they ended up meeting with the team, with Bruiser and Rudy now. And Dot is finna get ready to sign. Okay, he tells her his story about losing his brother. And she was like, I know you don't understand what I'm saying about my son. I know you don't understand how I feel about him, but just know that I had so much hope in him. He had so much promise, and it was snuffed out basically. And he was like, yeah, I know a little bit something about that. Even though you don't think I understand, I do. And he shares his story about his brother. And so he was like, I'm sure just like my brother, his dying words were make sure that mom is taken care of. I'm sure that your son will want to make sure that you're taken care of too. And so the first way to do that is to make sure that you're financially squared away. This is not going to make up for what you lost with your son, but this will definitely be a start. So just as she's going to get ready to go sign for the settlement of $250,000, she hesitates. And he ends up grabbing her hand because he can sense that this isn't right. And so he ends up telling them no deal. And so Leo was like, okay, well, don't you think that your client should say that first? And she was like, I'm with him. No deal. And so then Bruiser was like, well, Leo was like, he's not even an actual lawyer. What say you, Bruiser? And Bruiser was like, we'll see you behind in court. And so at that particular time, Leo is embarrassed for a second time. So he's had it up to here with Rudy. So they go back to their law office, and I think his second hand had said something. He had spoke out of turn, which kind of like preempted the hesitation on Dot's end, right? And so he's like getting onto his second hand, like, you shouldn't have said nothing, da 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 da. And so then they were saying how Sarah shouldn't even be there because she's basically feeding information, or so they believe, to Rudy. And so he basically tells her to prove that she wants to be there by giving them everything that she knows about Rudy. And not only that, but also giving them permission to have their lady hitter from the dynamic duo from earlier in the episode, have her, their lead investigator, I think her name is Jane, to pull up any type of dirt that Rudy has in, in his closet. And that's the way that wrap up for episodes 1 and 2 ends. Again, if I miss anything, y'all charge it to my head and not my heart, okay? It seems like it's going to be a promising show. I'm curious to see what type of favors Leo may owe Bruiser's dad. I want to know more about Bruiser's backstory and how she came to have the law firm. Because her dad is still alive. Okay, he's just retired. I also want to know more about what happened to Rudy's brother. I want to know more about the situation between him and his mom. Like I said, they're still developing the characters and their backstories, but for now, the main plot seems pretty good. So we'll see how it goes. But y'all let me know what y'all thought about it, okay? You can reach me at Me and You TV Reviews on Facebook and on Instagram. You can also reach me at My TV Reviews Podcast without the S on the end at gmail.com. I love y'all. I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful start to your week coming up. And until we meet over the airwaves again, I am Mo, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.